What's up guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to make homemade pumpkin pie and whipped cream. Now let's get started. And we're going to start out with the pie crust. So start by flouring your rolling surface and then take your pie crust out of the refrigerator and allow it to sit for about 5 minutes to come up in temperature. And that's going to make it easier to roll out. And this recipe calls for a standard 9 to 10 inch pie crust, and you can use store-bought pie crust, but this pie will taste 1,000 times better if you make your pie crust at home. And pie crust is pretty easy to make, so if you want to use homemade pie crust, you can find a great recipe in the description. So after letting your pie crust sit at room temperature for a bit, to make it more malleable, coat it in flour, and then it's time to start rolling. And if your pie crust is still a bit tough, you can use your rolling pin to hammer out the dough in the beginning, and this is a trick that's going to keep your dough from cracking, which you definitely want to avoid, because if the dough cracks, it'll be much harder to roll into a circular shape, which is what we're going for. So after hammering out your dough into a circular shape that's about 1/2 inch thick, it should be soft enough to start rolling. And when rolling, you want to roll from the center of the dough out to the end of the dough without rolling past the end. And this is going to help to keep an even thickness throughout the pie crust. And the goal here is to roll out the dough to about 12 inches across on all sides and somewhere between 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch thick. So once you feel like you've reached these dimensions, you can pick up your dough with your rolling pin and set it to the side while you prep your pie plate for baking. So get your pie plate and use a cold stick of unsalted butter to coat the inside of the dish. And after coating the dish with butter, sprinkle in about 1 tablespoon of flour and then shake the dish around to coat the butter in the flour, and then dump out the excess flour by tapping it on your rolling surface. And this is going to keep your pie crust from sticking to the dish while baking. So after prepping your pie plate, drape the pie crust over the dish and then lift the edge of the dough and press it firmly into the sides and bottom of the dish. You want to be sure that the pie crust is secure and that there are no air pockets between the dough and the dish. And after the pie crust is set, use a sharp knife to trim the dough along the edge of the pie plate so that the dough is flush with the dish. And then we are going to dock the pie crust. So use a fork to punch tiny holes all over the bottom and sides of the pie crust. And this is going to prevent the pie crust from slipping into the dish while baking. So after docking, we're going to crimp the edge by pressing a fork into it over and over again all the way around the edge of the pie until done. And this will not only make the pie look awesome, but it will help to further secure the pie crust to the dish to help it keep its shape while baking. So after crimping, stick your pie crust in the refrigerator and then move your oven rack to the bottom shelf and preheat your oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit while we make our pumpkin pie filling. And to start making the filling, get a large mixing bowl and add to it 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. The reason we're using canned pumpkin is because it's consistently good, relatively cheap, and always available. Now you can make pumpkin puree at home if you want, and all pumpkins are edible, but pie pumpkins work best. And to make pumpkin puree, all you do is boil the flesh of the pumpkin until it's tender and then puree it in a food processor. It's pretty easy. So after adding the pumpkin puree, add to the bowl 3 large eggs and 1 egg yolk that has been separated from the white. Now, if you want your filling to be super fluffy like a souffle, you can beat all of the egg whites before adding them, and if you like your filling on the thicker side, you can leave all of the egg whites out except 1 egg white. But this filling will be somewhere in the middle, giving you the best of both worlds. So after adding the eggs, add 1 15-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk, and this is going to give you your cream and your sugar in the same ingredient. And now we're going to add in the spices. So add in 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground nutmeg, and then 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger, and then 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground clove, and finally 1/2 teaspoon of fine salt, and then whisk all of the ingredients together until fully combined to complete the pumpkin pie filling. Now, as I said earlier, if you wanted a fluffier filling, you would beat the egg whites until stiff and then add half of them before whisking and then fold in the other half after all of the other ingredients have been combined. So after whisking, get your pie crust from the refrigerator and then carefully pour in your pumpkin pie filling. And you can use a spoon to add the filling if you want, and then use a spatula to scrape any of the remaining filling out of the bowl and into the pie. And after adding the filling, bake the pie for 15 minutes at 425 degrees Fahrenheit on the bottom shelf of your oven. After 15 minutes of baking, cover the crust with tin foil and then bake the pie for another 30 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And after 30 minutes is up, use a toothpick or a knife to check the filling to see if it's done by sticking it into the filling about an inch or two from the crust, and if the toothpick comes out clean, the pie is done. If the toothpick comes out dirty, continue to bake the pie, checking it with a toothpick every few minutes until the toothpick comes out clean. And after the pie has passed the toothpick test, turn off the oven and allow the pie to cool in the oven with the door cracked until the oven has come down to room temperature. Once the oven is cool, move the pie to your kitchen counter and allow it to cool completely to room temperature before serving. Because cooling the pie gradually like this is going to keep the pie filling from cracking, which is going to make your pie look much more attractive. So while the pie is cooling, I'm going to show you guys how to make homemade whipped cream. And the first step in making whipped cream is to pop your mixing bowl and whisk in the freezer for about 5 minutes to cool it down, because it's going to help keep things cool while you're whipping, which is going to give you a much better and lighter whipped cream. So after 5 minutes, get your mixing bowl and add in a half teaspoon of pure vanilla extract and 1 pint or 2 cups of heavy whipping cream, or you can use regular whipping cream. Heavy just means a bit more milk fat, which will help the whipped cream hold its shape for a little longer. So after adding the cream and vanilla, add in 1/4 cup of powdered sugar, and you can use granulated sugar if you want, and if you do, just be sure to whip only half of the recipe at a time so that all of the sugar dissolves and you don't end up with a grainy texture in your whipped cream. So after adding the sugar, it's time to start whipping, and if you're using an electric mixer like me, start the mixer on the lowest setting for about 30 seconds before turning the mixer to medium-high so that the sugar doesn't shoot out of the bowl, which is awful and can definitely happen if you're not careful. And once you start whipping the cream on the medium-high setting, you're going to whip this stuff for about 3 to 5 minutes until you start to see heavy tracks in the whipped cream from the mixer. Once you see heavy tracks, stop the mixer and pull out the beater to see if you can create soft peaks in the whipped cream. Soft peaks should droop at the top but hold their general shape, and if you can create them, then your whipped cream is done. And you can refrigerate it until you're ready to serve. So at this point, your pumpkin pie and whipped cream are ready to eat. So cut yourself a slice and then top it with a dollop of whipped cream and sprinkle some cinnamon on top to complete the dish. Because after all of that hard work, you definitely deserve a slice of pie. And I can promise you that this pie will taste amazing, especially since you made it. And if there are any leftovers, make sure you save them because this pie is far too delicious to be throwing away. And it can last for up to 4 days in the refrigerator. So for more information and recipes, you can check out our website, and if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our channel, and as always, thank you for watching, and enjoy your homemade pumpkin pie with whipped cream.